Hey, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome. My name is Maddie, and today I'll be sharing with you the books that I read in October. So my last wrap-up ended up being like 40 minutes long, so I'm going to try to keep this intro very short. But quickly, if you do not know what a wrap-up is, it's just a video, like I said just a few seconds ago. It's where I share with you all the books that I read in a month and all of my thoughts about each of the books I read this month. And I did read 9 books this month, which is awesome. That's a lot for me. I also read 9 books last month, so I'm kind of keeping up with the trend here, I guess. So yeah, really happy about that number. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the books in the order that I read them this month, so let's just get right into it. So the first book I read this month was One Small Thing by Aaron Watt, and I think this is gearing up to be my favorite book that I read in 2021. Oh my god. It was so good. So I actually don't want to give you the synopsis to this book because I believe it's really ideal to go into this book knowing nothing about it. I do feel like the synopsis gives way too much away, but as a little brief summary, I'll try to give it vaguely just to give you something. It follows this girl named Beth, and she recently lost her sister. She died, and so her parents are really grieving over that, and so much so that they are very overprotective of Beth. They don't allow her to go out past a certain time. They prefer her to stay home. They just keep a very close eye on her because they don't want to lose another child. But unfortunately, their strict parenting really ends up suffocating Beth, and she starts rebelling. She goes out to this party and she meets this guy there and starts up a friendship with him. But there's a lot more to him that she has yet to find out. And I'm sad that I can't give you any more than that, but really, you need to go into this book blindly, but trust me, it is so good. This book has a lot of really deep, touching themes in it. One theme it has is forgiveness, and it's a huge part of Beth's character. She's able to forgive someone even though she really shouldn't. She has so many valid reasons not to forgive this person, but she does, and it really speaks to how sweet and compassionate she is. I really love that about her. And Chase was so sweet. He faces a lot of ridicule because of something he did that wasn't really his fault. It was an accident. So it was really aggravating to watch every character just bandwagon on ridiculing him when what happened was an accident. It will really make you hate every single one of these characters except for Beth and Chase. They are all so frustrating, but they're supposed to be, so you kind of have to bear with it. But man, you will hate a lot of characters in this book. I'm just going to warn you. And I love the romance. I love seeing Beth and Chase come together despite the circumstances that they're in, and how they're able to make a relationship between them work is so fascinating. They really understood each other, and Chase was really able to help Beth through the grief of losing her sister, which is a really hard thing for her to carry, obviously. So I liked when he supported her and helped her through it. That was so touching. And another big theme in this book is focusing on the little good things about your days rather than focusing on the negative things, and that can really help you to move forward. That's actually where the title of this book comes into play, One Small Thing. One thing Chase says is that he would focus on one small thing every day that brought him joy, and he found that focusing on those little things helped him to forget about the bad things about his days, and that lifted his spirits up. I love that theme so much because that's something I can really take into account as, like everyone else, I have bad days, and sometimes the negative things about my days can just weigh on me emotionally, and it's really hard to deal with. But if you can focus on the good thing about your days, like even if it's a little tiny good thing that happened to you, that can really lift your spirits up. So I really love that theme, and I think that was a great theme to explore in a YA book because it's something that teenagers also struggle with. So I love this book so much. It was so cute. Oh my god, there were so many parts of this romance that just had me squealing. I was so proud of these characters for coming together, making their relationship work, and growing together. It was just beautiful. I would highly recommend. I'm super sad that I've now read all of Aaron Watt's books because they were all so good. I need them to write more because their books are just incredible. This was a definite 5 out of 5 stars. And then I continued on with the off-campus series, and I went into The Score. This is a series by L. Kennedy, and it is so good. The first book is called The Deal, and each book follows a different guy on this college hockey team and their relationships. All the characters are so cute and so lovable. So I would highly recommend this series. But this one goes into Dean, and I was very nervous about this book because Dean is oh my god, this is such a bad word to use. I almost don't want to use it, but he's like the man whore of all the guys. They're all players, but he is the worst of them. So going into this book, I was nervous because even though I don't mind like player type of guys, I was starting to get very tired of that trope because all of the guys had been that character type, and because Dean was like that character type times 1,000, I was like, I don't know if I'm in the mood for that anymore. So I ended up taking a break from the series for a little bit and then went back into it. And I gotta say, this book showcased so much more to Dean than him just being a ladies' man. There's so much more to him, so much deep stuff to his character that was so touching. I ended up just loving him. So this book does follow Dean, but also follows his love interest, who is Allie, and she's a character that we have seen in this series before, so I was super excited to get to know more about her. And her relationship with Dean starts off as just like a one-night stand, and she wants nothing more than that. But she ends up seeing Dean a lot more and ends up obviously growing genuine feelings for him, so it just explores their relationship. And it's super interesting because of the fact that Dean is such a player and he doesn't really commit to relationships, he just wants hookups. It was super interesting to watch him settle down with Allie and try an actual relationship with her. But he really grew to love Allie, and I found the relationship just so believable and sweet. There are parts of this romance where it just had me in tears. Like there's this one part where Allie just expresses how much she needs Dean because she's going through a really trying time, and my heart just ached and felt so happy. Like it was really cool to see her throw her burdens on him and lean on him for support. I thought it was really sweet. And one thing about Dean that I didn't realize in previous books, I can't remember if it was mentioned, but he's actually super rich. He's like Ouran High School Host Club level rich, which is like really rich, and I never noticed that before. I really like how this book incorporated the fact that he is rich, because all the characters feel like things are just handed to him because he's rich. Like he can get away with good grades because his family is very well known, so his teachers are like, oh, because I know your family and I'm their friend, I'll give you a good grade just because of that. But Dean actually doesn't like that. He wants to earn his way through life. He doesn't want things just handed to him, and I really respected that. Because if a teacher told me that they would just give me a good grade because of my social standing, I would be really tempted to let them do that. Like, I think anyone would, but Dean, he's not like that. He just wants to earn his way through things, and I respected him for that so much. And another thing about him that is explored in this book is the fact that he's had a very easy life because he's wealthy, and he has a really good family. Like, not a lot about his past is dysfunctional, so he's had an easy life. So when things come up in this book that test his mental stability, it was very fascinating to watch how he handled that, because he's not used to life testing him because things have always been easy for him. But there's several instances that come up throughout this book where he really has to deal with some tough times that he's not used to, and he kind of breaks down at some points because he's not used to that. And I really appreciated the realistic aspect about that. And I won't mention who dies, but someone dies in this book, and it was absolutely shattering because we've been with this character throughout the whole series, and they just died in this book, and it wrecked me. I cried so hard. I was so upset. So yeah, there's some sad stuff in this book, I'm gonna warn you. So yeah, this was so good. It left off on a cliffhanger, which made me need to read the next book right away, which I pretty much did. I'll talk about it later in this wrap-up, but I gave the score 5 out of 5 stars. So good. I love Dean so much more than I did before. It's just amazing. I've been filming for 16 minutes and I've only talked about 2 books. Y'all, tell me to shut up. Why do I talk so much? I just have so much to say about these books. I can't help it. I'm so sorry. I hope you guys love long videos because I have a feeling this is going to be like over half hour. Next, I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, one of my favorite series of all time, so I was super excited to get back into this one. I'm rereading it before I read the latest book in the series, which is A Court of Silver Flames. I wanted to refresh my mind on everything that happened in the series before going into the latest book, so that's why I'm rereading this series. So the first one is A Court of Thorns and Roses. If you don't know what this series is about, it follows this girl named 𝑓𝑟𝑢𝑖𝑡𝑠. She lives in a fantasy world where fae exist, and she ends up killing this wolf who turns out to actually have been a fairy. And he is a fairy that is a part of this High Lord's court who is a fae. And so this High Lord comes after her and forces her to live with him as payment for her killing one of his men. But she ends up starting to get to know this Fae High Lord better and starts to fall in love with him. And she also starts to discover the curse that his court is under. And she might be able to help break it. This one is actually a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so if you're into fairy tale retellings, this is a good one. I talk about the series so much, so I feel like I don't need to say any more about it. It is just so great. I love these characters so much. The first book is a little hard to reread because of events that happen in later books. It makes you not like a certain character in this book. And so that's why it's a little hard to reread. So I definitely don't love the first book as much as I loved it the first time around, but I'm still going to stick to my 5 out of 5 star rating just to stay true to how I felt the first time I read it. And it's still great, even though it's a little less enjoyable now. I have a lot of things to say about this next one, so prepare yourselves. This is going to be like a full-on review. But the next book I read was The Silver Swan. That pretty much summed this up. I don't need to go more into this one and my feelings on it. Just sigh. That's it. Nah, I'm just kidding. Let's get into it. So this one, oh my god. Missed potential. So much missed potential with this one. Alright, let's get into what it's about. So this follows this girl named Madison, and she enters this new school, and she comes across this group of boys. They are in a club, and they're all really dark and mysterious. They have that whole vibe going for them. She gets involved with them. They start kind of stalking her at some points, and start like being really toxic with her. And yet she still is so intrigued by them. She gets in kind of a relationship with one of them. She gets involved with a few more of them. That's it. There's more to it than that, but that's like the basic premise of it. So this one, I say it's missed potential because the concept of this book was like so compelling. So going into this book, I thought the Elite Kings Club, which is the name for this group of boys, I thought they were just a generic club. Like, I thought they were actually a gang. They are a cult. I did not know that going into this book. So I was super surprised to find that, and I was super excited when I found out they're actually a cult because I thought that would be so interesting to explore a cult because I've never read about any themes of a cult in a book before. So I was super excited, and I thought that would really make the plot super investing. It kind of did. But however, the characters really ruined this book for me. So Madison, the main character, was so infuriating. I said in my September TBR, I thought I would have a bond with this character because we share the same name. But no, I was actually super offended to have shared a name with her because she was just such a dumbass. She is just so unpleasant. She's so hateful. Like, she's just so spiteful. She slut-shames so many girls, and it's just negative all the time, and I absolutely hate slut-shaming, so I hated whenever she would just slut-shame. I do not tolerate that, and also she was super hypocritical. She would contradict herself constantly. Like I said, she would slut-shame girls, but then within a few days of each other, she would be kissing several guys. And I'm just like, why would it make sense for you to slut shame someone when you're doing the exact same things that they're doing? Like, own it. I don't understand it. And she just made so many poor decisions. She was so dumb all the time. Like, she was so interested in these guys, and yet they kept stalking her, and like one of them kissed her without consent, and it just made no sense. I'm just like, why do you want to be with one of the guys she is in more of a romantic relationship with? Why would you want to be with him when he's been stalking you, has been like harassing you? It makes no sense. And that guy was Bishop. He's like the main love interest, and oh my god, he was such a try-hard gangster. It was so cringy to watch. I'm like, this guy just thinks he's hot stuff, like, so much, when he's not. He just tried so hard to be a bad boy, and I was not buying it. I was so over it. And I really did not like the writing style of this. One thing the author did that was really, really annoying is that the name of the song that was playing in the background of a scene would be mentioned constantly. And I don't mind that if it's done sparingly, but it was done over and over and over again in this book that it became distracting and really, really annoying. So I was not into that. So yeah, this one was a mess. It was not good. I would not recommend it. The only thing that kept this from being a 1-star, because I gave this book 2 stars, is because the cult aspect of it kept me intrigued. Like, there was such a mystery behind it, and I wanted to know answers to what was going on with this cult. But we got very little answers at the end, and I'm not interested on continuing on with this series, even though I really want to know the answers behind what this cult does. I just don't care enough about the characters to continue reading it. So this one was really, really disappointing. It had such a promising concept, but the execution was just really, really bad. And the next book I read, I actually own, but my mom borrowed it, so I'm just going to place a picture of it right here to show it. And that is Lakesedge by Lyndall Clipstone. This was my Owl Crate book for the month of September, and because I want to get to my Owl Crate books like right away, I did pick this one up, and I actually really enjoyed it. I say actually because it's more of a fantasy book, and it's really hard for me to like get into fantasy like I've mentioned, so this one took me by surprise. So this one is a gothic fantasy. It follows Violetta, and she's taken away to this mansion away from her village because her brother has these magical abilities that he can't control, but this guy who takes them away can help him control his powers. So they end up living with him, and while there, Violetta starts to discover the darkness that is plaguing the lands and who is behind the darkness. And this darkness is actually slowly killing Rowan. So her journey is just her trying to help Rowan overcome this darkness and help save the lands from this darkness. It was really, really, really dark, if you couldn't tell from the summary, but I really enjoyed it. It was really hard for me to get into at first because of the fantasy elements in it. So I had to keep on reading it for a while until I could actually start to get really invested in what was going on, but once I got into it, I really could not stop reading it. And while Violetta wasn't the most memorable heroine, there's not a lot of unique things about her, she was still very, very likable. I found her to be very kind and just compassionate. I really loved the love she had for her brother and her concern over him, and she just really wanted to make sure he was safe. She was just such a good big sister. And Rowan was definitely my favorite character. He was very misunderstood because he did something in his past that made a lot of people very wary of him, but a lot of him is not what it seems, and I really enjoyed exploring the truth behind his character and his action. And he's someone who really prefers to carry all of his burdens on his own, and it's so sad to watch because he desperately needs help, and that's why I loved how Violetta was there to help him overcome the darkness that was suffocating him, because that's something he really needed. And of course, this one also has a romance. The romance between Violetta and Rowan was so sweet. It progressed in a way that was very natural and believable, and like I said, I really loved how Violetta was able to help him and be his support, and Rowan was also able to do that with Violetta because she had a very traumatic past where she lost her parents, and he was able to help her get through that and love herself more, so it was really nice to see. I haven't heard anyone talk about this one at all. It is brand new. I only heard about it through Owl Crate, so I think it's a little underrated. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it deserves more recognition and more readers because it was super good. It's the first in a series, and I will definitely be continuing on with this series, and I gave Lakesedge 4 out of 5 stars. And then I continued on with my reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses series with A Court of Mist and Fury. Still my favorite book in this series. Just like a lot of fans, this is their favorite book in this series. I am so on board with that. It's just the best book in the series. It's so good. The direction this book goes in is so surprising. It's so vastly different from the plot of the first book that you just don't see a lot of the events in this book coming. That's what makes it so good. And the romance, top tier. So amazing. So good. So healthy, and we love to see that. I just gotta say, best book in the series, best romance, love it, 5 out of 5 stars. And then I was super excited about this one. I went into The Goal by Elle Kennedy, the 4th book in the Off-Campus series. Like I said, last book left off on a cliffhanger, so I had to get to this one as soon as I can. And I was very pleased with how the events of this turned out. So The Goal follows Tucker. He's the last guy that we have to follow. And he's the one guy of the group that is the least known about. He doesn't show up a lot. We get to see him very sparingly throughout this series. So going into this book, I only knew that he was like the mother hen of the guys. Like, he was the nurturer, which made me already like him because I knew that he was just a very sweet, caring guy who just took care of everyone, which I love characters like that. So I was super into him already. And I was super happy to find out even more about him in this book. And this one also follows the love interest, which is Sabrina, who is a character that shows up a lot in this book, and all we knew about her was that she was a bitch. Every character hates her so much for reasons that are valid, but I had a feeling going into this one that I was going to end up loving Sabrina because, like with the last book, I thought Dean was just a player, but once I read the score, I found out that there's so much more to him than that. And so going into this one, I was like, we do know Sabrina is a jerk, but I think this book will make me like her because we're going to be exploring more of her character, and I was right. Sabrina is very aggressive and not likable at first, but her circumstances make her reactions to things kind of understandable. She has a very hard home life, and her past is not that great, and you can understand where her frustration with things are coming from. She's also someone who's very goal-oriented. Like, she sets her mind to something, she's gonna do it. She has her whole life planned out, and I just really admired how focused she was on her future and setting her goals. Like, that's something that is very inspiring. And Tucker, like I said, he was such a sweetheart. So sweet. He is such husband material. Everything you'd want in your husband is Tucker. Perfectly. Which made him kind of too perfect. He barely has any flaws, that it's hard to hate anything about him. He's kind of too perfect. Like, that's the one gripe I have about this book. Tucker is too perfect. He needs more flaws. I wish he had a little more flaws, but at the same time, I love him so much because of just how amazing he is. And the relationship between Sabrina and Tucker starts off as strictly just sex, which I've come to find out that's a theme throughout this whole series. I feel like all the guys, their relationships start off as only hookups with their love interests. It's the same thing that happened in this book. But we get to see them grow to like each other. Even though it was very slow moving, Sabrina is so stubborn. She really does not want to have a relationship with Tucker because she's so focused on just school and her career. But obviously we know through her actions that she really does love Tucker. Like, she just will not admit it. And Tucker actually has an insta-love moment with her, which I wasn't a huge fan of because I'm not into insta-love at all, but he was just infatuated with her right away. It was still really sweet regardless of the fact that I'm not super into insta-love. And I can't even tell you the big point about this book because it is a spoiler. I can't talk about it at all, even though I really want to. But it's a trope that is apparent in the romance genre a lot. However, I have never ever read about this trope before, and I've always wanted to. I have been a romance reader for only like 2 years. That's how long I've been reading adult romance and new adult romances. So there's still some tropes in the genre that I still have yet to encounter, and I've been wanting to read this trope for so long, but I've never found it in a book. So even though it's a trope that I find a lot of romance readers are sick of, I was all for it. I'm like, give it to me. I've been wanting to read about this for so long, and I can't even tell you what it is because it's a spoiler, but I was so excited for it. And I feel like it was handled so well in this book. That's all I'm going to say about it. Hey, this is me from the future. I'm currently editing this video, and I forgot to mention something else about this book that I really liked. So I'm going to do it here even though I look so ratchet right now. I look horrible, but ignore that. Anyway, another thing I really liked about this book is that it takes place in the same timeline as the last book, The Score, did. And that was something really different because the next books in the series, each of them followed events that happened after the last book. So it's kind of cool and different with this one where everything that happened to Tucker correlated with everything that was happening to Dean. Both of their experiences were happening at the same time. So I like that aspect about this book a lot. It made it really different from previous books in the series. This is technically the last book in the series, but there's one more book that it's a compilation of short stories following all the characters throughout this series. So I have that to read, but yeah, pretty much I'm done with this series, which I'm a little sad because it was a great series. I would highly recommend it. It is the off-campus series. If you're into new adult romances, pick it up. It is so good. And I gave The Goal 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. This one was, I had like good and bad thoughts about it, so we'll get into it. Going into what this one is about, it follows Misha and Ryan, and they are pen pals. They've been pen pals for 7 years, and they've always had a rule that they would stay strictly anonymous to each other. They would never meet each other in person, never look each other up on social media, just so they wouldn't ruin the magic of how they see each other in their letters. Misha ends up running into Ryan on accident, and what he does, he realizes that she's not the same type of girl that he knew her to be in her letters. She's a lot more of a bully, and he does not like that. But meanwhile, Ryan is wondering why Misha has stopped writing to her. He just went MIA and she hasn't received a letter from him in months. And so she's dealing with that. And the whole time, Misha knows about Ryan and who she actually is. But Ryan never realizes that it's Misha that she met that night. So that's a huge secret that Misha keeps. He ends up being around Ryan a lot more, but Ryan never knows that he's the guy that she's been writing to for all of these years. So I love the pen pal trope. I've read a few books with that trope, and I've always really loved it. I love the concept of two characters being secret pen pals and never meeting each other in person and falling in love through their letters. I find that concept so cute. So this book had that. It got a lot more interesting when Misha realized that Ryan was not the same girl that she portrayed herself to be in her letters. So I really loved exploring that. And Ryan herself was such a complex character. The reason she becomes a bully is strictly to fit in. She's always been an outsider, and she's just never been able to make friends easily. And because she wants to fit in with the popular crowd, she starts to build this whole different personality where she becomes a bully because, you know, the popular kids are bullied. That way they would like her more. She doesn't want to be a bully, but she feels like she has to fit in. But I liked seeing her start to realize that her being mean to others was not right. It was horrible. Even though she was getting a lot of friends from the popular crowd because of it, she did not like who she had become. And so I liked seeing her journey trying to fix that and better herself. And I liked Misha okay. I did find him to be a little too aggressive sometimes. He does put Ryan in her place for being a bully and tells it to her straight what she's doing is awful. But sometimes he took it way too far. He would call her like really derogatory names that went past chastising her and went into full-on like verbal abuse, and I was not okay with that. And I wish he would have been a little more easier on her. Even though she was doing things that were horrible, the way that he was treating her didn't make him much of a good guy himself. But he does soften up at the end. We get to see him really, you know, soften more and be a little more mellow, so I liked seeing that. I just really didn't like him in the beginning. I just found him to be too over-aggressive, and I like my bad boys, but he just took it way too far sometimes. And because of Misha's verbal aggression towards Ryan, I found it kind of hard to believe that she was falling in love with him. I'm like, this guy abuses you with words sometimes, and that's not cool. I don't see how you could be attracted to him because of that. But I did start to grow accustomed to the romance as it went on. It started to become a lot more sweeter as Misha started to mellow out a lot more and not abuse her verbally anymore. Like, I started to feel for their relationship a lot more. I found it to be sweet after a while. There was a miscommunication aspect in this book because Misha is keeping it a secret from Ryan that he's the guy who she's been writing to for 7 years, and that was a little frustrating. I didn't really understand the point of him keeping it a secret from her, because that would only cause her to become angry when she found out down the line that he is actually her pen pal and he's been under her nose the whole time. So I didn't find how it made sense for him to keep it a secret. It didn't make a lot of sense. Other than adding to the angst of the story, I'm just like, why couldn't you have just told her? It would have made things so much more easier. And I was catching on to the plot twist in this book, but it didn't fully set in for me until it actually happened, and that made it a really, really good plot twist. It was super just surprising, and it made everything that pertains to Misha's goals makes so much sense, and it really added to his development a lot, so I appreciated it. It was a fantastic plot twist. So I had mixed feelings about this one. I was super excited about it because I did love Birthday Girl by this author. It was so good, so I had high hopes for this one, and it somewhat lived up to those high hopes, but I did have some problems with it as well. So I don't love it as much as Birthday Girl, but it was still pretty good. I would still recommend it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm 50 minutes into filming, y'all. 50 minutes. Please help me. This is a disaster. I tried to make this video short. I just couldn't do it. I'm so sorry. But that's okay, because we're at the last book. The last book I read this month. I actually finished it today, and that is The Air He Breathes by Brittany C. Cherry. I wanted to find another Kindle Unlimited book to read because I just recently bought an actual Kindle, so because I wanted to use it, I needed to find a book to read on it, so I just looked up Kindle Unlimited recommendations on YouTube, and I came across this series. And this is the first book in that series, and my gosh, this was so good. I cannot wait to talk about it. So this one is a romance. It follows this guy named Tristan, and you find this out really early on, so it's not a spoiler, but he ends up losing his wife and his son in death. And he's very broken because of that. And another character who is extremely broken as well is Elizabeth, because she lost her husband in death. So they both lost people so important to them, but they end up finding each other and grieving together, and that's basically the whole plot of this one. I won't say more than that. It is sad. This book is so depressing. I mean, obviously based on that synopsis, you know it's going to be depressing, but man, I cried pretty much 75% of this book, and I don't cry that much when I read my books. Like, I'll cry for a little bit, but for me to have cried several pages is insane. I was just in tears constantly. Like, this book will really bring out the tears in you. I really did love these characters. I loved Elizabeth. She has a daughter, so she's a mother, and she's such a great mother, and she's dealing with a lot, having lost her husband and being a single mom now, so I really like seeing her journey throughout her grief and trying to get over it, as well as Tristan's journey of doing the same. And I loved seeing them come together. Tristan was very mean to Elizabeth at first. He's actually under a lot of scrutiny from everyone in this town because they're in a small town and everyone knows him to be a jerk and very aggressive. And so when they find out that Elizabeth is starting to see him, they get very judgmental. They're like, you should not be with him. He is terrible. He's mean. He's a monster. But she doesn't see him that way. And we start to realize that he is not any of those things. He's just hurting. And the reason he becomes such like this monster, it appears to be, is because he doesn't feel like he deserves relationships or love because of the fact that in some ways he feels like he's responsible for his wife and his son's death, and he just feels very low and just has no confidence in himself, and that causes him to not want to build relationships with others. And so he tries to push Elizabeth away, but of course they come together and they help each other through their losses, and it's just so beautiful to see. This was just a gorgeous story that I adored so much so that I just know I have to read the rest of the books in this series. My only critique about this though is that I felt like with the writing style, it was a little too passive at times. I feel like there was some telling and not showing, and I prefer more showing. It would skip to the next scene, and in that scene it would go over all the things that happened with the characters and how they're feeling about a certain character. And I'd like to see those things more shown rather than just told that they happened. And so that's the only thing about this book that didn't really like so much. But other than that, everything else was great. The ending of this book took me by surprise. I did not see it coming, and it was just insanity. I could not stop reading. My mind was blown. So there's some twists in this one as well. I'd recommend this one if you're into romances, of course, and if you're into sad books. Be prepared. This book will just make you depressed. I had to put it down for at some points because I was like, I'm getting too sad. I need a moment to just compose myself. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I will mention this one quickly. It's the book I'm currently reading. So I read a little bit of it in October, but I didn't end up finishing it. And that is A Court of Wings of Ruin, the 4th book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So I didn't finish it this month, but I plan to continue reading it in November. So I'm sure I'll be including it in my November wrap-up. And for anime, I actually didn't really watch any anime this month. I have been planning to incorporate anime. I've been watching into my wrap-ups, but honestly, I didn't really watch any anime this month. I watched a few episodes of season 5 of My Hero Academia, but not enough to like talk about it. So I'm not going to talk about any anime in this wrap-up. But hopefully in November, I'll have watched enough anime to include those in my wrap-up, but we'll see. So that was all the books that I read this month. 9 books, only 9 books, and I'm almost an hour in filming this. I feel like maybe I need to start splitting my wrap-ups for the month up and do like a part 1 and part 2. I might do that depending on how long this video is after editing. If it's over a half hour long, I think I'm going to start doing that because I hate to make you guys sit through this long of a video. It's like a full-on movie, so I'm sorry about that. But like I said, I hope you don't mind long-form videos because I'm sure this one is super long once again. But if you watched it up until this point, thank you so much. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I would really love to know. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more anime-related videos and book-related videos. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, those links will be in the description box, and I'll be back really soon. Bye!